today on Caught for Two, a spoiler-free, quick before you buy it video for Dungeons and Dragons Bedlam in Neverwinter. Dungeons and Dragons Bedlam in Neverwinter. This is a weird game. It's pitched as sort of a Dungeons and Dragons role-playing-ish type game, but with an escape room puzzle. So it's sort of a hybrid. It's clearly pitched at kids. It says 12 and up. 2 to 6 players. That seems pushing it. And you only play it once. You can only play through it once. It's 3 acts. Each act says it's going to take about 90 minutes. I think that matches our expectations. And then that's it. Then you have to pass it on or throw it in the trash.
Jesse and I have a little bit of a disagreement on this point, but Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro, they have like a line of games, including Castle Ravenloft, Wrath of Ashardalon, and some others that I feel are designed with the gateway into Dungeons and Dragons in mind. It's a bit of a stepping stone. And I think this game really lives in that world. I think that's where this game shines the most. So it does a bunch of things. Number one, it has an overarching story like a campaign, but each chapter is an individual thing, which is an important point for D&D. There's combat, traps, different races with different classes being able to be mixed, having some very small amount of special ability, very light elements of these, but all strong things that are in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's sort of like I say, a gateway in. But the most important thing I think that it does to help people in that regard is that it has these prompts. Role-playing can be, pretty, difficult for people to grasp or to kind of get into. And so it'll have these things like, if you succeed at a test, it will say like, describe how you did it. How did you get out of this trap? And I think it's very easy for people when they get a prompt to be like, hey, how'd you do it? Oh, well, I jammed my dagger in there and I sprung the spring or whatever. And I think that's much easier than just saying, what do you want to do? You can do anything in the world. And I think it really gives everybody a taste of all of those traditional, very common elements you'll find in a Dungeons and Dragons game.
It was surprising when we first encountered it on one of the cards because you're not used to it. You're used to playing a game with hard rules, and then all of a sudden it just says, describe what went wrong if you rolled the dice wrong, and what went wrong with the trap. And it's kind of fun. Now, we didn't, some groups love doing that stuff. For me, that feels a little awkward, but you could see some group of kids really loving that. And I think we said this is going to be spoiler-free, and it is, but let's just show the basic components. Like, these are the boards, these are the maps that you're going to be working on.
They're pretty warped.
They're not that pretty thin. The components here are fairly cheap, but it depends what you would pay for this. And there are some figures, and then most of the game is cards. And it's, as you described, it's pretty, the idea, and then there's some surprises in here, but as you said, the idea of, you're going to criticize me for this piece.
Why did you do that? It's one
All right,
take.
Just leave it. We're still going. The point is that the promise of the game is really great, that you're doing combat and solving puzzles and doing this role-playing, and you do, as you said, pick your races and configure stuff, but, for me, the first fall down the stairs with this game is that the actual gamey elements of the combat, of the suiting up, choosing races, feels so shallow here. I mean, it's really, really minimal, basic, and no real strategy. There is no strategy in these fights that we had. Picking who to attack. You're just rolling your dice. If you hit, you do some damage, and then you wait around.
Yeah, I think, so just to touch on the components real fast, they're pretty flimsy, like there's the warpage of the boards, and like the cards are not great quality and stuff, but I mean, for the price point and essentially a disposable game, I think it matches that, it's serviceable. On the other point, Jesse and I kind of had a little bit of a disagreement about this, about the difficulty level of the puzzles and things like that. And I think that's the better strength of the game, are the puzzles and things. Which there's some pretty neat stuff in here that serves the story. We didn't actually finish the entire thing because I think for us, Jesse kind of alluded to this about like the prompts and things. It's not really for our age group, I
Yeah.
think for us, the puzzles, there's not enough meat on the bone in this game for a avid gamer to enjoy, or an avid adult gamer, I should say. I think having a little bit of history, I'm playing Hero Quest when I was like a young teen, like 15, 14 years old or whatever. That blew me away. And I think that maybe, bringing this up to like some 13-year-olds, and again, we don't have kids, so we're just guessing on the ages, but I tend to think that like a 13-year-old age kind of group would find these puzzles both doable, challenging, and interesting, and maybe have those moments like, oh, but what about this? So I think that's kind of the best world that this, wheelhouse for an age group.
Well, let me disagree with you on this point about the puzzles. So for me, the actual combat gaminess is not there. There's no fun. So then you have to ask, are the puzzles compelling and interesting? And what's the difficulty level? And it turns, from my perspective, again, as you said, we don't have kids. We're sort of guessing about this. But from my standpoint, the real problem with this box is that the age group, the level of sort of sophistication that kids are going to need to play the gamey combat stuff is a mismatch for the level of complexity they're going to have to handle to solve the puzzles. It's rated on the box as 4 or 5 difficulty, and I think that is a closer reflection to how difficult the kids are going to encounter the puzzles. They were not so simple and a little bit confusing, and I think the kids that would enjoy the role-playing part of this are going to have a hard time with those puzzles. So if I was going to recommend this for a group, I think it would be a very narrow niche of either kids that have some real patience to work on these puzzles, or maybe kids with an adult and an adult helping them with the puzzle and then playing the game. But they're going to shift from some quick, fast role-playing to being like, the car's going to go screeching halt, and they're going to be like, what do we do now? We don't know how to solve this puzzle. But maybe you'll find a kid that's got some enough intellect, curiosity to work on those puzzles, but it's going to be tricky.
Yeah, I'll just sum up by saying I think that this is kind of a good game for that kind of age group. However, I think you'd probably be just as good getting something like Unlock, which is very comparable. Or if you're an avid gamer or an older big kid like us, or like you're an older adult or something, the Exit series is probably much better to go for, or to kind of go full into like something like a Dungeons and Dragons or one of those other Castle Ravenloft type games.
I think your advice is good advice. It's hard to match both the fun of playing in this, and you'd be better off picking one area. Either go for a escape puzzle game that's targeted toward the age, or find just a roll and fight combat game. All right, there you have it. There's our advice about who this would be good for.
Hopefully that helped you to make a decision as to whether it's for you or not.
And let us know in the comments if you buy it and play it and have a different opinion than we do. We'll see you on the next video. All right.
So this is how I feel about the game.
All right.
It does seem kind of challenging.
All right.